So the big question that I have is, what is going on with Ashley Benefield? Like, why is she saying different things at different points? Is she the victim of a violent man, or is she someone trying to deny her husband from seeing his child, or her estranged husband from seeing her child? Let's take a look. This is an order from the Stand Your Ground hearing where the judge commented on what the doctor had found and what the doctor had heard from Ashley Benefield. Take a look. During Dr. Broder's individual time with Ashley, she told him on more than one occasion that she had no intention of reconciling with Doug and that it was her intention to relocate to Maryland with her mother and her daughter. She did not want Doug to go with them, despite email exchanges where Doug said he was also moving to Maryland and intended to live with Ashley and her mother. Quite the opposite. Ashley was adamant to Dr. Broder that Doug was not moving in with her and they were not getting back together. She also told Dr. Broder that she did not believe Doug could be a good parent and was not comfortable with him having the child overnight. Her intention, once she lived in Maryland for at least 6 months, was to appeal to the child protection authorities there for help because she wanted to block Doug from having their child. Let me bring in our guests. We've got to get to the bottom of this. So joining us, forensic psychiatrist, trial expert, witness, and columnist, Dr. Carol Lieberman. Yeah, Dr. Carol Lieberman, take a listen here. This is more from this order. Ashley never told Doug these things in Dr. Broder's presence. Instead, she told Dr. Broder she was going with the flow so as to not make him angry and have him blow up. She claimed that Doug was controlling, highly manipulative, and intense. This appeasement strategy included going to lunch or a movie with Doug, but she told Dr. Broder that they were not living together and were not intimate. So it seems that Doug is reading it one way, but she is doing it for another reason. And this is tough. Someone has to figure out if Doug is stalking her, threatening her, or if she is manipulating the situation to keep him away so she can have sole custody of her daughter. It's very confusing to me because she's telling the doctor one thing, telling, it seems, the mediator and the lawyers and Doug something else, but is still spending time with Doug.
Well, it's actually not that confusing when you look at her. First of all, these kinds of evaluations, I do these all the time, and you really have to be very careful as an expert psychiatrist or psychologist to explain to the person up front and perhaps remind them that what they're telling you is not confidential, that you are going to be writing a report, you're going to be testifying in court, and you're going to be telling everybody, what your assessment is, what is in the best interest of the child. So, so either she didn't know or she, that it is confusing. But clearly, there's a connection between the fact that he was going to be testifying in court on September 30th and her having murdered her husband on September 27th. I mean, I think that she didn't want the jig to be up. So I think that there was a connection there. But she really, as I might have mentioned in a previous show, one of my books is Bad Girls, Why Men Love Them and How Good Girls Can Learn Their Secrets. She is the quintessential bad girl. There are 12 different types, and she is the gold digger type, but it wasn't necessarily for gold per se. She wanted a ballet company and she wanted a baby. Now, of course, the baby would also bring child support. But those were the things she wanted. And as soon as she, got those things, I mean, as soon as the ballet company failed, and then she got the baby, she didn't have a need for him anymore. And she wanted to get rid of him, but she was gaslighting him. She kept, pretending that there was hope. She kept giving him hope because he did love her. He was starstruck. He did want to be with her. And so she knew that if she kept feeding him enough, then he would be there and he'd keep, giving her everything she wanted.
And she's saying, no one's helping me protect my child. right? That's the impetus for this. And Doug, she perceives as the threat. What are your thoughts here? Because I'm looking at this a couple different ways. Doug could be an actual threat, or Doug could be like a perceived threat by her, or he could be no threat at all, and it's sort of the line she's using to get her daughter all to herself and get away from this guy that she doesn't want to be with anymore. She
manipulates men. And I think she thought that she was manipulating the psychologist just like she manipulated Doug. I don't think he was any threat to his daughter at all. Let me just go back for a minute. Part of what makes a bad girl is they're having a dysfunctional relationship with their father. And her father abandoned her when she was a young girl. And, her mother supposedly had this email account where she said 2 geese, no gander, and then it was 3 geese, no gander. So it was her psychology to take men for what she could get from them, and especially Doug. I mean, the other part of it is, in order for a bad girl to be successful in what she wants, she has to find a sitting duck. And he was a sitting duck when she met him. He had just lost his wife 9 months before. He was in pain, his cousin was saying, from an injury. And she walks up to him and he was a sitting duck. And she took him for everything until she didn't need him anymore. And it's just such a sad story.
Now, there is violent, he's punching the wall, he's firing the gun into the ceiling. That's very questionable behavior here, Dr. Lieberman. We have about 15 seconds. Do you see that as violent, threatening behavior?
Well, she was driving him crazy. She was driving him she was making him so frustrated with all of this gaslighting, all of this, oh yes, there's a chance I'm going to be with you. Oh no, there isn't, pulling out at the last minute. And I think the proof of the pudding is in the eating as far as who would have been the better parent. Her daughter is standing in front of the courthouse with a sign, please free my mother or something. Any good mother would not let their child.
We're going to talk about that. Dr. Carol Lieberman, when we come back.
And then putting that child out there in front of the courthouse with her sign, we understand the sentiment, but that's not what most people do. That's very unusual to do that with a 6-year-old child.
And this is what Tommy Benefield's talking about. That's Doug and Ashley's daughter. She's there with her grandma holding a sign, keep my mommy free, as her mommy's inside a courthouse fighting murder charges. So what about that? What about that? What would make someone put their child out there, and is it good for the child? Is it unhealthy? What does it tell us? Let's bring back Dr. Carol Lieberman. Dr. Carol Lieberman, you were talking about this. How about from the child's perspective? She's about 6.5 years old. Does she understand what's going on here?
Well, it's emotional abuse because, yes, of course, she would like her mother to be free. But on the other hand, her mother's accused of killing her father. So she's going to be having really conflicting emotions. She would like to be with her father, too. So it is just torture for the child. It's really so narcissistic, so just the mother's just thinking of herself. And this is very cruel. She could be reported for emotional child abuse.
If Ashley Benefield is, in fact, convicted and is found guilty and is sent away for a long time, I presume that grandma will raise her. What do you tell a child? When do you tell them? How do you explain the situation? And how much interaction should this child have growing up with a mother who is behind bars for killing her father?
Well, I think that the mother is probably not any better of a maternal figure than I think a good case could be made for her to be raised by her father's family. Perhaps the cousin, for example. I don't know if he wants that. That's a possibility, or some other family member of the father. You know, it is cruel. It's very confusing. It's, you know, and when you look at her, the video that you just showed, she does not look like she's happy standing there, you know, trying to get her mother's freedom. She looks like she's you know, in pain, in emotional pain. So it's just torture.
Dr. Judy Ho, in the alternative, if Ashley Benefield is exonerated, is found not guilty at trial, and walks out and lives the rest of her life, at what point should she talk about this, and how should she talk to her child about it? Because it will be on the World Wide Web forever. Go ahead.
Good, but that would be great, but it seems like it's very unlikely that she's going to. That doesn't seem like her personality to do that. I mean, it's hard. You know, what you're supposed to tell a child in circumstances is, it would very much depend upon what your view of it, and her mother's view. You know, her mother's going to say, "Oh, your father was really violent towards me." I mean, that's awful to tell a child.
It's a tough situation. We'll see how it turns out. There's two different versions of what happened here. A jury has to come to some conclusion and figure out what happened and why it happened and what it all means. But incredible insight tonight. Dr. Judy Ho, always appreciate you, and Dr. Carol Lieberman as well. Thank you so much for helping us through this, and I'm sure we'll speak about it again.